having a super fantastic sparkling day. Welcome to Porch Light Letters podcast number 2523. Where was your family when they learned to drive? Whew, this is a good topic. I do have to apologize for being late. I've spent the morning out with my mum and dad, and I have some amazing news to follow. I know that I have been releasing weight since I landed back in New Zealand, like physically releasing the stress, the overwhelm, the anxiety, the depression, all of that stuff has been released physically, not just mentally, but also physically. So we went into a store to try and find me some more winter tops because my long sleeve tops mainly have Christmas stuff on them. But we don't celebrate Christmas in the middle of winter in New Zealand where it's right now, unless we're doing a midwinter's Christmas party. And this top I have on here, I absolutely love. It's soft, it's comfortable, but it's like way too big for me. And I figured out today why it's so big. I have gone down five sizes since I arrived back in New Zealand. So I arrived back in New Zealand on the 8th of November, and I have dropped 5 sizes in my shirts. Yeah, and I'm pretty sure I've dropped about that in the jean department as well, because I had a pair of jeans on, and like the crotch of the jeans was hanging down almost about mid-thigh, and the waistband was resting just on top of my hip bone. And I said to Mum, I said, if I had to go to the bathroom, I don't even need time to do the button and the fly, because they just slide right off. And she said, what's holding them up? I said, my hips. But 5, I could not believe it was 5 sizes I am down. So that just absolutely blew me away today. But anyway, so what are we talking about today? We're talking about when did they first learn to drive? When did your grandparents get their driver's license for the first time? Who taught them? There's just so much that you can get out of this, because learning to drive is one of those milestones that changed a person's world. For many people, it was their first real taste of independence. Suddenly, they could go visit friends, drive to work, explore new places, and experience a freedom they'd never known before. For some, it opened the door to new careers. For others, it simply meant not having to rely on someone else for a lift or a ride. But think about this. When you ask the older generation about learning to drive, the learning to drive process, ask them about the licensing process as well. They learned to drive, then they went and had their licensing test. Did they have to do a written test, which was answering questions? Did they have to do an oral test, or did they have to do just get in the car and drive? What was their driving style like? And as soon as they finished the test, if they passed, did they get a full license straight away? I know here in New Zealand, we've got different levels of licensing here in New Zealand. You get a learner's permit, which means you can now go in the car with a fully licensed driver. There are restrictions on when you can be behind, like the hours in the day that you can be behind the wheel. And you must always, 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 always have a fully licensed, sober driver in the seat and in the passenger seat next to you, teaching you how to drive. Then you have restricted license. Then you go from that to restricted license. And I'm not sure what happens in between. I don't know what test you have to do in between the learners and the restricted. It doesn't apply to me, so I'm still trying to figure it out. But they have to do whatever it is to get to the restricted license. Restricted license allows them a little more freedom. But again, there's certain things that they can and cannot do, certain people they can and cannot have in the car and that sort of stuff before they go to their full license, which means they have full access to the car. They can drive whenever they want. They can drive with whoever they want, and that sort of stuff. So there is, it's a stepping program. I did not have a stepping program. My dad, we had a very big backyard at the play in Whitechapel. We had a very big backyard. And so my dad one day, and we had a Mitsubishi minivan. I can't even tell you the make of it. I have a picture of it somewhere. It was green. It was the only one in town. So whenever anybody saw the vehicle in town, they knew exactly who was in the car. And my dad was the local traffic cop in town. So everybody knew where we lived. Everybody knew who we were. Would see the green van around and everybody knew who it was. And it was a manual. So I had to learn a stick shift. So I had to learn how to drive that, which was fine. And my dad had me go down. We went from the driveway down. We had a ramp that went down to our backyard. And so he had me drive down to the backyard and drive around the backyard. Then later on, he would drive over to the intermediate school, and we'd go up this very steep hill to the top where the school was. And then he would drive down onto the big playing field at the back where we had the soccer field. We had the football field, all of that sort of stuff. It was all over the same area. And then he would have me driving up and down the lines of the whatever, like the rugby field, had me up and down the lines of the rugby field, and even backing along those lines I'm very good at driving in reverse. I spent a lot of time driving in reverse. And when it came to having the RV and having to reverse that, I'd never driven an RV before that day and had never reversed one. And so the guy who was from the car dealership was giving me the RV dealership was giving me hints and tips about reversal driving and that sort of thing, because I had a camera that was going on and off. But I used the mirrors and just took my time and picked it up like that. It was so easy to back in that RV. I cannot tell you. And I even said to the guy, I said, I drove my husband's Yukon for a while, and I said, this is way easier than driving his Yukon. I was in a Fleetwood Bounder in 2006 Fleetwood Bounder. And it was 33 feet long, and I could back that thing and I could drive that thing way easier than I could my late husband's Yukon, just to give you a thing. So he taught me to drive that. But when it came to driving on the road, he had a friend who had just become a driving instructor and opened his own driving instruction business. And so Dad got him to work with me and take me on driving around town and things. And like he would do things like, I'll be driving down the main street and he goes, what color was that person's raincoat on the left-hand side that we just passed? And I'll be like, oh crap, I did look at my mirror. So I look at my mirror and I go, yellow. He goes, yes. He says, you got to remember, look in your mirrors, watch your mirrors. And so he gave me a few more pointers and all of that and had me driving certain areas and things. And then it finally got to the point of having my exam. And in those days we did a written test. It was like about 20 questions, multiple choice, might have been 25. And then we had an oral test, and then we went for a drive. And so this particular day, we happened to be off school for whatever reason we weren't in school, maybe in school holidays, I don't know. And there was only mum, dad, and I in the house. I don't know where my brothers were. And there was and because Dad had the day off, they bring in another traffic officer from the local area. And so they brought this traffic officer in. So Dad invited him up for lunch. Unbeknown to me, I was sitting my driver's license that day. So what they did, and because Dad knew I had great test anxiety, I had a huge amount of test anxiety, huge. And so they very casually worked it into conversation. They were so good. I mean, these guys were so good. And so Dad mentioned that I was learning to drive, and this guy sort of like, oh, well, how are you doing on your theory? And I said, well, I've done some of the practice stuff. He goes, well, hang on. He says, I've got one here. He says, go try this and see how you go with this. And I went, okay. So I went and sat down. It looked a little different to the ones that I've been doing, but I figured, okay. So I went through and passed that one. And he went through and checked it, and I got everything right. And then he just started asking me questions. Five oral questions. He just started asking me questions about things, and I gave the answers and all that sort of stuff too. And boom, I was done with the theory. Now and so then my dad had already set up a time to take me down to the council office, which is where the Ministry of Transport had their office. And this is before they merged with the police in New Zealand. So we had Ministry of Transport, which was all road transportation, speeding, drunk driving, all of that sort of stuff, road testing drivers. We didn't have a DMV. It was the traffic cops that would take you for your road test. And so then later on, we went down to the council's office, and I go, what are we doing here? And Dad says, oh, you're going to go for your practical now. I'm like, wait, what? They'd already explained to me I'd done my theory. Theory was done. And so the officer came out. We got into the minivan that we had, and I was like, oh, great. And we went off driving. I followed his instructions and did everything he needed to me. But then he took me up Manakariki Hill, and I could have killed him, looking back, because Manakariki Hill was the steepest street in the town. At the top of the hill was the intermediate school or middle school called Manakariki Intermediate. There was a few houses, about 3 or 4 teachers' houses up there, and then we went over the top of the hill and down into the area where they had all the gravel and I'm trying to think of the name of it, where you could go buy your gravel and your different types of gravel and all of that. So they had I can't even think of the name of it, and they also had a lookout up there, so you could look out over the entire town of Waitara. And so we get up the top of this hill there, and he has me do a U-turn, a 3-point turn at the top of the hill, and says, okay, now we're going to go down. Actually, first of all, when we're going up, he had me stop halfway up the hill and do a hill start. Now, remember, this is the steepest hill in town. The kids are not allowed to ride their bikes up or down the hill. They have to walk their bikes up and down the hill. They're not allowed to ride at all. It is completely prohibited because there's the main road at the bottom of the hill. Plus, they didn't want people trying to ride up the hill because it's very steep. And so I get down and I go, this is going to be fun. And he goes, why is that? I said, I've never done a hill start in the van before. And we didn't have a handbrake as such, like a brake that you pull up in the middle. It was a lever that you had to pull in twist and then put in. So I thought, well, this is going to be fun. And so it took me like 2 or 3 attempts. But when I did get going, I looked in the mirror and I says, well, that was in time. He goes, well, I see there's a truck coming up the back. And there was one of those dump trucks that come in to pick up a load of gravel. And it was coming up the hill behind me. And so we get to the top of the hill, pull over so he can go past. And then he has me do a 3-point turn, not just a U-turn. I had to do a 3-point turn to drive back down the hill. And so I'm driving back down the hill and I get to the bottom and I hit. At the bottom, it was a stop sign. But because the hill is so steep, at the bottom of the hill where the gutter comes down, they have a piece of concrete that came out from the edge of the guttering out, so the water wasn't running straight onto the road, and the grate was right below it. Well, of all the things to hit, I hit that, and I was like, so he says it's okay. He says just back up and we'll move around it. And so I backed up. I stalled. I backed up a little bit, tried to turn the wheel. It didn't quite go out far enough, and I hit it again. And I think it was on the 3rd attempt. There was a pickup truck that came down the hill behind me and was now behind me, wanting to get out. And so the passenger thankfully was paying attention, because I see him tapped his driver on the shoulder, pointed to the passenger seat where he could see an officer sitting. And so the pickup truck backed up. So I was able to back up and get around this thing. Across the road from the bottom of the hill is the doctor's surgery, the doctor's office. There's 3 doctors that worked in there, and my mum worked in there as a nurse as one of them. And but out front, there was this car sitting there, and these 2 women in the car were in absolute hysterics watching me. They knew what was going on. They saw the officer in the seat. They knew who I was. They knew whose van it was. It's the only one in town. And the fact there was an officer in the seat next to me meant that I was doing my driver's license. And they were roaring with laughter in their seat. And I'm just like looking around, feeling so embarrassed by this. So after this guy moved his pickup back, I managed to drive back up enough to get around the concrete stump at the bottom there and take us back to the council offices. And the officer and even the driver instructor had mentioned this to Dad, but the officer also mentioned it to him. We were at one intersection where I sat for ages waiting for a break in traffic. Now, there was plenty of opportunities that I had to go across the traffic, because I was doing in New Zealand, it would have been a right-hand turn in New Zealand, equivalent to a left-hand turn in the States. And I had to get across the row of traffic. Well, both the officer and the driving instructor mentioned it previously to Dad, and the officer who was testing me that day mentioned it to him as well. And I mentioned how I patiently waited at this intersection, had multiple opportunities to go, but did not go until the road was a little clearer. My dad then explained to both of them at the individual times that what had happened when I was 6. We were living in Invercargill, and I picked my friend Gary. Him and I were walking to school, and he had to go to the dairy to get something for his school lunch. And because this is the days you take lunch with you, schools don't provide them, you take lunch with you. And so we had walked across Queen's Road, I think that's called. It was the longest road in Invercargill. It's the main thoroughfare. And the dairy sat on a corner. So it sat on Queen's Road and this little side corner. And there was a stop sign here on this road to come around. And so we came out of there, and Gary was ahead of me. And he looked to the left, looked to the right, looked to the left again. Nothing was coming. So he stepped out at the same time this car came out around the corner, ignored the stop sign, and clipped him and hit him. And I was back on the footpath at this point, and we had the ambulance came, the police came, the traffic cops came, the ambulance came. And eventually one of the mothers who was walking their children to school on the other side of the road saw what was going on, came over, got me, and walked me to school, got me to school safely. And recognized me, and so came over and got me and walked me to school a single day. And they couldn't figure out why until I think it was Mum or Dad walked me to school that day to find out what's going on. There is a place that we had to cross the street, and I would stand there. Oh, there's a car coming. I'll wait for it to come. And that car would go past. Then I go to walk up. No, there's a car. And this was a long road. I had plenty of time to walk across, walk back, walk across, walk back before these cars got to where I was. So you can see the distance that we had. We had a lot of distance. But as soon as I saw a car, I would stop walking. I would not cross the street. And it's all because I'd seen my friend Gary get bowled over by a car when he went to cross the street. And apparently that has always affected me and things. And so Dad said this is what's affecting her with the driving, and waiting patiently at an intersection for clearance before going past. And the cop said, that's not too bad. It's not too bad to be that cautious. So, but I did pass my driving test that day. And it was and we had little booklets, and I actually have it somewhere because I came across it when I was packing in the States. The little driver's license booklet. It's still in the little leather cover that I got for it. It's a little book, and you get coupons in there. They put these little coupons in there to show that you've got a valid license. Then they switched it to this indestructible paper stuff, and you would fold it up and put it in your thing. And I have that as well. But now they're on the size, almost like the American driver's licenses. They're on like credit card size plastic cards. I don't have mine yet. I had to wait for my stuff to come across so I could, because my name had changed, and I had to provide my marriage certificate. So now my stuff is here. I can actually go get my New Zealand driver's license. Now that my marriage certificate is sitting safely in my closet. So that was me getting my driver's license. I didn't get my own car until, and that way I was 15 or 16 when that happened. I did not get my own car until, years later. It was years later. Mum and Dad had this car that they had bought because they needed a second car for a short time. And so they purchased this car rather than renting. It was cheaper. It was a yellow Ford Cortina, which is a sedan, four-door sedan. And when they went to sell it, I asked them what they wanted for it. And so I purchased it from them, which was pretty cool. But I didn't have the car very long because I had gone to work that day. Mum was using my car because Dad had their car for whatever reasons. Mum was using, and she'd come back and had gone and got the groceries, and she'd parked the car half on the grass edge and half on the road because we have narrow streets. And she'd taken all the groceries inside, and she was on the phone when she heard this bang, and went out, and somebody from the school had come out from across the road, had come around the school, come in and banged into the back corner of my car, and that was the end of that car. Yeah, I was very upset because I enjoyed that car. I enjoyed driving it. I had a lot of fun with it. Never took it to work every day. I always sat at home. On rainy days, I would drive it down to the train station, but most of the time it sat at home, and then I could go do my stuff in the evenings, go and coach gymnastics and all that sort of stuff, and go do stuff on the weekends and that sort of thing. But yeah, Big Bird got rear-ended and got written off. And they took, the insurance company had it and did all their evaluation on it, and they came back with a report, and Dad says, well, they've missed this, and this, because my dad had checked it out before the insurance company got there. And thankfully I have a dad who knows cars. And he says, and he read through the report and says, okay, he says, these are the things you need to ask them about, and ask them about this, and some what about this, because they haven't mentioned them in the report. And so when I went back to the insurance company and said, hey, we've had a look over your report, and we noticed that it doesn't mention that this is broken, this is cracked, and went down the list that Dad had given me. And about 7 days later, I had a check in hand and the car was written off. So that was my first license and my first car. So talk to people about the first time. When was the first time you got your license? What did you have to go through to get it? Every family's story is a little different. Perhaps Mum or Dad patiently taught you in an empty car park. Maybe a grandparent shared their wisdom from their passenger's seat, or perhaps older siblings let you practice on quiet country roads. Some people passed their driving test the first time, while others needed a few more attempts before earning that license. The first car often becomes part of the story too. It may have been old and unreliable, covered in dents, or the pride and joy of the family. No matter what it looked like, it carried memories of first jobs, weekend adventures, holidays, late night drives, and milestones that will never be forgotten. These are the stories that rarely appear in official records, yet they become part of the family's legacy. They tell us how life changed, how opportunities grew, and how one simple skill gave someone the confidence to explore the world beyond their front door. Your challenge for today is ask a family member about the day they learned to drive. Who taught them? What was their first car? Did they pass their driving test the first time? What did they have to do to get it to pass the driving test? Where did they go on their very first solo drive? Take a few minutes to record their story, because today's memories become tomorrow's family history. And let us know in the comments below some of the really cool stories that you learned about. And with that, we are out of here. Go out, have a super fantastic sparkling evening, and we will catch you guys tomorrow evening at 6 p.m. Pacific. Hei konera.